Everybody in the United States just made a new Netflix account this year, and most of the films they provide are a waste of time. In April of 2020, the New York Times put out an article that claims that Netflix has nearly 16 million subscribers in the first 3 months of the year. And whether you were one of those people or not, I bet you hate sitting down to start a movie and realize halfway in that you don't really have enough time to start a better one. This presentation serves two purposes: highlight the aspects of a movie that hold the most sway over film's quality, and to teach you how to analyze and discern the quality of a film all on your own. First, we're going to outline the parts of the film, and then describe symptoms of failing to develop those parts, and then do a 5-step process to casually critiquing a film. First step is movie anatomy. There's 5 parts: literary design, visual design, cinematography, editing, and sound design. Literary design is the narrative at its very core. It's the script, the dialogue, the characters. Visual design is the effects, the visual cohesion. It's how the narrative transfers to the audience. Cinematography is the shot. It's the technique. It's how the film influences the audience's understanding of the narrative. Editing is the end-all, be-all of the film. It's the execution and its final form. Sound design is the final element. Music, emphasis, and emotion. It's how the film tells the audience what their reaction should be. Each of these elements serve a different purpose, but are designed with one goal: to serve the narrative, because a movie lives and dies by its narrative, because the story is the primary focus of a good film. The narrative is what happened, and if you treat it well, it'll last for generations, becoming a moment in history that deserves to be remembered. But if you neglect it, it results in a movie that's just forgotten, not because of a bad message or a malicious intent, just because there wasn't a reaction to remember it by. Here are the 3 ways that I think a movie goes wrong most frequently. A lack of logic, and therefore immersion, keeps the audience in their own minds rather than in the film. It lessens the impact that otherwise would have left an impression on your mind. When logic doesn't line up in a believable way, the audience is left unable to trust the rest of the story. A good example of this is how in Fantastic Mr. Fox of 2009, the animals struggle against their animal nature. Because of course they would, they're animals. The story has an impact because we can believe what the story is telling us, because it follows rules that we are willing to accept. But in a movie like 2016's Zootopia, they try and teach a message about ethnicity and how people shouldn't be judged based on the nature of their birth, which is very serious, and yet they choose to outline this lesson with animals, who by their very nature in our world defy the lesson that they have been chosen to teach. Which seems like a pretty small logical fallacy, and because it's a kids' movie, most people can just ignore it. But in the end, the imagery used conflicts with the message, and that lapse of logic can be enough to make the lesson less powerful. Moving from logic to pacing, because a lack of pacing means that even if the audience would have believed the film's logic and permitted it to tell the story, the viewers would have never been able to decipher what it means. When learning a new skill, practice makes you familiar with it. And likewise, in a film, you have to take some time to ensure that the audience is capable of understanding what's going on. Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything. This is an issue that action movies in particular can fall into, where they generate so much action that the story becomes muddled by uncertain motivations and character development. And you end up with a character that the audience isn't really sure if they should root for. But speaking of fighting in action, a lack of conflict means a lack of interest. A film can be easy to agree with and easy to understand, but still boring and uninteresting if there's not a reason to keep watching. Conflict is every narrative's fuel to keep the audience invested in the outcome of the story. Think about The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring from 2001. They have one overarching goal, and they have little obstacles along the way that they have to get through, or else they'll fail the primary mission. Now consider a movie like Cars 3 of 2017. The main character's story arc is learn a lesson, and I have to just look forward to them no longer being wrong. And that's not exciting. And since I already know better, why should I watch? As we've already established, there are plenty of ways a movie can go wrong, but by intentionally critiquing the movies you do watch, you can ensure that less and less are disappointments. Movies are a business venture, and The Shining of 1980 was very well received, and so Stanley Kubrick went on to make dozens of films. By being your own personal film critic, you ensure that the movies you like and dislike are given their due reward, because the most effective form of advertising is the word of mouth. Casual critique is as simple as 5 steps. First step, watch the film. Avoid outside influence as much as possible to avoid biases. The second step is to try and describe the movie in as much detail as possible. The goal here is to create a baseline to compare the next 2 steps to. The third step is to clarify any misconceptions you have about the movie. What confused you? What you thought meant one thing was supposed to mean another, etc. This part benefits from a second person's perspective, but it can also be done alone. The fourth step is to analyze what flaws are present in the movie. This is a regular critique, but it should be considered through the lens of how could it have been better. A critique that doesn't offer alternatives or enhancements is just complaining. The fifth and final step is to publish your findings, but actual publishing isn't really required. This stage acts basically as a secondary clarify step, where the goal is to share your critique and see if other people generally agree or disagree with your decisions. In conclusion, film is the most common modern entertainment, and understanding what makes a good film or a bad film is critical to the progression of better films and the recession of bad ones. Film is made up of many parts, but they all serve to advance the narrative to the audience's benefit, and when the movie fails, it typically results in a bad experience for the viewer and neglect for the film as a whole. The best way to encourage better films and discourage worse ones is by intentionally analyzing the films that you do watch to help inform you and those around you about the state of the film industry now and in the future. And hopefully, this presentation managed to teach you what makes up a movie, how those parts enhance or devalue a film, and how you can discern the quality of a film all on your own. Thank you very much.